So today we're going to talk about the integumentary system, or your skin, your glands, your hair, your nails. Those are all part of the integumentary system. And the integumentary system has some very important functions: protection, excretion, temperature regulation, sensory perception, and the synthesis of vitamin D. The resistance to trauma and infection is huge. The skin suffers the most physical injuries to the body, but it resists and recovers from trauma better than any other organ. And your skin is an organ. The epidermal cells are packed with a tough protein called keratin, and they are linked by strong desmosomes that give the epithelium its durability. Few infectious organisms can penetrate the intact skin. Bacteria and fungi colonize the surface, but their numbers are kept in check by its relative dryness, its slight acidity, which is 4 to 6 on the pH scale, and certain defensive antimicrobial peptides called germicide and defensins. The protective acidic film is called the acid mantle. There are also other barrier functions. The skin is important as a barrier to water. It prevents the body from absorbing excess water when you are swimming or bathing. But even more importantly, it prevents the body from losing excess water. The dermis is also a barrier to ultraviolet, which are UV rays, blocking much of this cancer-causing radiation by reaching deeper tissue layers. As we mentioned, it deals with vitamin D synthesis. The skin carries out the first steps of synthesis of vitamin D, which is needed for bone development and maintenance, and the liver and kidneys then complete the process. The skin also deals in sensation. It is the most extensive sense organ. It is equipped with a variety of nerve endings that react to heat, cold, touch, texture, and pressure. These sensory receptors are especially abundant on the face, palms, fingers, soles, nipples, and genitals. It also deals in thermoregulation. Cutaneous nerve endings called thermoreceptors monitor the body's surface temperature. In response to chilling, the body retains heat by constricting blood vessels on the dermis, keeping warm blood deeper in the body. In response to overheating, it loses excess heat by dilating those vessels, allowing more blood to flow close to the surface and then lose heat through the skin. It also deals with nonverbal communication. The skin is an important means of nonverbal communication. Humans, like most other primates, have much more expressive faces than other mammals. Complex skeletal muscles insert on dermal collagen fibers and pull on the skin to create subtle and varied facial expressions. So, there are some layers to our skin that we need to discuss. The thickest in areas where it is subjected to water and abrasion. And then we have thin areas like the eyelids, eardrums, and external genitalia. There are two major layers, the epidermis and the dermis. And then we have what's called the hypodermis, which is located right under the dermis. So we're going to go through and talk about these different layers. Here is a picture of a skin cube. If we start at the bottom, we see that bottom layer, which is yellow and is full of adipose cells. That is called the hypodermis. You can see there are blood vessels, there are veins and arteries going through there. Then we have the middle section, which is called the dermis. We see sweat glands, nerve fibers, hair follicles, all kinds of things. And then the very top layer is the epidermis. So, the epidermis. It is made up of stratified squamous epithelium. It serves as a boundary It protects the body against the entrance of pathogens, ultraviolet radiation, and excessive water loss. It contains 5 types of cells. Stem cells, which are undifferentiated cells that divide and give rise to keratinocytes. Keratinocytes, which are the majority of the epidermal cells. They are named for their role in synthesizing keratin. Melanocytes, which also we see in what's called the stratum basal, which we're going to get to, and they synthesize the brown to black pigment melanin. There are tactile, or what are called Merkel cells. Now these are relatively few in number, but these are receptors for touch. And then we have dendritic, or Langerhans cells, and they are found in 2 layers of the epidermis called the stratum spinosum and the stratum granulosum. They are immune cells that originate in the bone marrow but then migrate to the epidermis and epithelial of the oral cavity, esophagus, and vagina. They stand guard against toxins, microbes, and other pathogens that penetrate into the skin. When they detect such invaders, they alert the immune system so the body can defend itself. So, if we break down the epidermis, we can break it down into different layers. The first one is the stratum basal. It consists mainly of a single layer of cuboidal to low columnar stem cells and keratinocytes, resting on a basement membrane. Scattered among these are the melanocytes, tactile cells, and stem cells. As the stem cells divide, they give rise to keratinocytes that migrate toward the skin surface and replace lost epidermal cells. The second layer is the stratum spinosum. This layer consists of several layers of keratinocytes, and in most skin, this is the thickest stratum, but in thick skin, it is usually exceeded by the stratum corneum. The deepest cells of the stratum spinosum remain capable of mitosis, but as they are pushed farther upward, they cease dividing. Instead, they produce more and more keratin filaments, which cause the cells to flatten. Then we have the stratum granulosum. This consists of 3 to 5 layers of flat keratinocytes. There is more in thick skin than in thin skin. The keratinocytes of this layer contain coarse, dark staining granules that give the layer its name. Then we have the stratum lucidium. This is a thin zone, superficial to the stratum granulosum, seen only in thick skin. Here, the keratinocytes are densely packed with a clear protein named eleinin. The cells have no nuclei or other organelles. This zone has a pale, featureless appearance with indistinct cell boundaries. And lastly, we have the stratum corneum. This consists of up to 30 layers of dead, scaly, keratinized cells that form a durable surface layer. It is especially resistant to abrasion, penetration, and water loss. So here it's saying that it takes approximately 2 weeks for new cells to complete their journey through the epidermis. So once they are created through a mitotic division, they move slowly up through your body until basically they're sloughed off. You lose millions of cells a day. Underneath the epidermis, you have what's called the dermis. And it contains collagen and elastic fibers, which gives it strength and toughness and extensibility and elasticity. There are 2 layers within the dermis. There are these finger-like extensions called the dermal papillae, and then there are downward waves that are called epidermal ridges, and there you find the reticular layer. So again, two layers, the papillae and the reticular. The papillary layer is a thin zone of areolar tissue in and near the dermal papillae. This loosely organized tissue allows for mobility of leukocytes and other defenses against organisms introduced through breaks in the epidermis. The layer is especially rich in small blood cells, so it has to do with your immune system. The reticular layer of the dermis is deeper and much thicker. It consists of dense, irregular connective tissue. The boundary between the papillary and reticular layers is often vague. In the reticular layer, the collagen forms thicker bundles with less room for ground substance, and there are often small clusters of adipocytes. Stretching of the skin in obesity and pregnancy can tear the collagen fibers and produce striae, or what we call stretch marks. So this is the area where we have pressure, pain, heat, and cold receptors. These are found in the deeper parts of the dermis. As we mentioned, this area is supplied with nerves and blood vessels. And it's important for temperature regulation and supplying nutrients to the epidermal cells that lie above. Then we have the hypodermis, or what's sometimes called the subcutaneous layer. This was that bottom yellow part. Subcutaneous fat is hypodermis composed predominantly of adipose tissue. So the hypodermis has a lot of fat cells, but that is because it serves as an energy reservoir and thermal insulation. It is relatively abundant in the breast, abdomen, hips, and thighs. The subcutaneous fat averages about 8% thicker in women than in men, and varies with age. So it attaches the skin to underlying tissues and organs. It is the site where you would get what's called a subcutaneous injection. It is the site of white blood cell action. It is a heat insulator, fat storage, and it helps conserve body heat and can retard the penetration of external heat. And it's a cushion because of the adipose. All right, let's talk about skin color. So we all have different skin color. Every single one of us is colored a little bit differently. And that is because we have different pigments, different amount of pigments within our body. We all have hemoglobin, keratin, and melanin. And depending how much we have of each, we have a specific skin color. So the hemoglobin is the red color from red pigment in our red blood cells. Keratin is a yellowish pigment that we find in the stratum corneum and dermis. And then we have melanin, which is a brown-black pigment formed by melanocytes in the epidermis. And surrounding epidermal cells can basically absorb it or pick up the melanin as it is produced. The amount of melanin that you have and that you produce is inherited. So the more production you have, the darker skin you have. And that helps block out UV radiation. Melanocytes are equally distributed. And sometimes we have freckles. If you have light skin, you may have freckles. And that is an excess buildup of melanin in one location. Duration of ultraviolet light exposure can also determine how much melanin is produced. Skin color of various human races results from different amounts of keratin, keratin, and melanin. Okay, then we have some what we call accessory structures in our integumentary system, and one of them is your hair. So, hair is formed by keratinized cells. Your hair is keratin. It is a protein. It is the same protein that you find in your nails. And it is made up of two parts, the shaft and the root. And here you can see both. There is also a hair follicle, and this contains the hair root. The bulb of the follicle is the site of where new hair growth takes place. So deep within the dermis. New cells from the bulb then become part of the root. As you know, your hair grows, and it just keeps pushing out of the skin. That's just how it works. And there are glands that surround it, which is why sometimes your hair is oily. We also have what's called an erector pili muscle. This is the muscle that could make your hair stand up. It contracts and raises the hair in the follicle on the end. This is what if you get goosebumps, like I said, if your hair's standing up, this is what's doing it. But in our case, it doesn't really do much. Just if you get goosebumps, someone probably isn't scared of you. But in like a dog or a wolf, when their hair raises on their backs, that is a defense mechanism, and that actually makes them look bigger, right? It's a little different in humans. We don't really, just because you get goosebumps, someone isn't frightened of you, right? A little different. Hair is found over most of the body, but not on the soles, palms, nipples, lips, and some parts of the external genitalia. And it protects the body. You might not think of it as a protector, but it does. It can stop things from getting in your eyes. You can have what's called a guard hair. There are hairs within your nostrils that also filter out, foreign particles or different agents that you don't want. So it's kind of constantly keeping stuff from getting in, and it also keeps us warm. And then we have nails, and they are on the dorsal surface of our fingers and toes. And like I said, they are made up of keratin, the protein, same as your hair. And they are colorless. And here we see the parts of the nail. You have the actual nail, you have the nail bed, the lanula, and the root. And they function as protection for the tender skin underneath and in object manipulation. Glands are also part of the integumentary system. They form from the epidermis that grows inward in the dermis. And there are three types of integumentary glands: sebaceous, seduceriferous, and circuminous. So where are those three found? Well, sebaceous glands produce an oily secretion called sebum. They are flask-shaped with short ducts that usually open into a hair follicle, although some of them open directly onto the skin surface. Sudoriferous glands come in two types: apocrine sweat glands and merocrine or eserine sweat glands. Apocrine sweat glands occur in the groin, anal region, axilla, which is your armpit, and areola, in mature males in the beard area. So they function more, obviously, after puberty. The apocrine sweat glands are the scent glands that respond especially to stress and sexual stimulation. They are not activated until puberty. And in women, they enlarge and shrink in phase with the menstrual cycle. Then I mentioned the merocrine sweat glands. These are widely distributed over the entire body, but they are especially abundant in the palms, soles, and forehead. They function to cool the body, and they also excrete some of the same waste as the kidneys. These are like, this is why you get sweaty palms, right? And then there is the ceruminous glands. And these, there's only one type of these, and they are found in your ear, and they form your earwax. They are simple, coiled tubular glands with ducts leading to the skin surface. Cerumen is the technical name for earwax. And it actually has many benefits. Cerumen keeps the eardrum pliable, and it waterproofs the canal. It can also kill bacteria and coats the guard cells of the ear, making them sticky and more effective in blocking foreign particles from entering the canal. All that going on in the ear. Here's a picture of the sebaceous gland. You can see here, the gland literally goes right to the hair. That's, where it would secrete the oil. Here are the sweat glands that we just talked about, the apocrine and the merocrine, or the eucerin. So the apocrines, remember, empty secretion into a hair follicle. They are located in the axillary and genital regions. They are activated after puberty, and they can kind of produce a milky sweat because they are excreting proteins and fats. They are usually odorless, and sometimes the function is unknown. And the merocrines, they're all over the body, and they secrete sweat onto the surface directly. And this is your watery perspiration. This is your perspiration. And they are activated when your body temperature increases. It acts as a cooling mechanism. And your ear glands. And they keep out foreign particles and insects. You don't want an insect getting into your ear canal, do you? I don't think so. Thank goodness for earwax. All right, folks, that wraps up the integumentary system. Don't forget, it's an organ. Your skin's an organ. It's the largest organ in your body. Hope you enjoyed it. Take care.